Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing amusement. The blue dot representing Earth's contribution to the Galactic Coalition fleet looked pathetically small compared to the massive formations of Zephyrian battlecruisers and Manthari dreadnoughts surrounding it. "Status report on the human contingent," he commanded, his four arms crossing in what his species considered a gesture of mild entertainment. Lieutenant Voxhai consulted his datapad, struggling to contain what appeared to be laughter. "Sir, the humans have sent exactly 12 small vessels. They call them destroyers, though they're barely the size of our scout ships. Total crew complement is approximately 800 beings." The bridge erupted in chittering sounds that served as laughter among the Zephyrians. Even the normally stoic Manthari officers allowed themselves slight mandible clicks of amusement. 800? Admiral Kethvar's secondary eyes blinked rapidly. The Korathi sent 40,000 warriors, the Volani contributed 60 warships, and Earth sends 800 primitives in tin cans? The war against the Scourge had been raging for 3 cycles now. The insectoid enemy had swept through the Outer Rim territories, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but barren rock in their wake. Every civilized species had contributed to the coalition, pooling their military might for the final push to retake the Centauri cluster. Well, almost every civilized species. The humans had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their crude chemical rockets and primitive nuclear weapons had barely qualified them for associate membership in the Galactic Council. Most species viewed them as barely more advanced than the wildlife on their home world. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet commander," Communications Officer Thelnis announced. "Put it through. I could use some entertainment before we engage the enemy." The holographic display shimmered, revealing a human male in what appeared to be a dark green uniform. His face was weathered, with graying hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to assess everything they looked at. The nameplate on his uniform read, Reynolds. "Admiral Kethvar, I'm Colonel Jake Reynolds, commanding the Earth Expeditionary Force. We're ready to commence operations." Several officers on the bridge struggled to contain their amusement. The human's vessel was so primitive, it didn't even have proper holographic technology. The image was flat and two-dimensional. "Colonel Reynolds," Admiral Kethvar replied, emphasizing the relatively low rank. "Your contribution is noted. However, I must inform you that this operation requires experienced warriors. Perhaps your ships should remain in the rear guard while the real military forces handle the combat." Reynolds's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. "With respect, Admiral, my troops didn't travel 50,000 light-years to sit on the sidelines. We're here to fight." "Your troops?" Lieutenant Voxhai whispered to his commander. "Sir, our intelligence reports indicate humans have no real military experience beyond conflicts on their own world." Admiral Kethvar nodded dismissively. "Colonel, your species' idea of warfare involves throwing metal projectiles at each other. The Scourge utilizes energy weapons, quantum shields, and bioadaptive armor. I'm afraid your enthusiasm is not sufficient for this type of engagement." "We'll see about that, Admiral." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. No one had ever spoken to Admiral Kethvar with such casual disrespect. "Insubordinate primitives," the Admiral muttered. "Very well. Deploy them in Sector 77 Alpha. If they wish to throw their lives away against the Scourge vanguard, so be it. Perhaps watching their ships get destroyed will teach them proper respect." Sector 77 Alpha was considered a suicide mission. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Scourge hive cluster defending the approach to the main fleet. No ship had ever survived contact with more than 3 Scourge vessels, and this cluster contained at least 30. The human fleet moved toward their assigned position with surprising coordination. Their ships maintained perfect formation despite their primitive appearance. Each destroyer was roughly 300 meters long, angular and utilitarian in design. They looked more like industrial equipment than warships. "Admiral," sensor operator Zekthul called out, "the human vessels are unusual." "How so?" "Their hulls appear to be composite armor rather than energy shielding. And, sir, I'm detecting massive amounts of conventional explosives aboard their ships. Chemical explosives." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Chemical explosives were considered museum pieces by galactic standards. "They're going to fight energy beings with gunpowder?" someone called out between fits of laughter. Admiral Kethvar was beginning to feel embarrassed by the humans' presence. When word of this reached the Galactic Council, it would reflect poorly on his decision to allow them into the battle line. "Sir, the Scourge Hive cluster is moving to intercept the humans," Zekthul reported, his amusement fading. 37 vessels, including 2 heavy bioships. The main screen shifted to show the approaching enemy. Scourge ships looked like massive insects, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with organic energy. They moved with predatory grace, already charging their plasma cannons. "Should we move to support them?" Lieutenant Voxhigh asked. "No. Let them learn their lesson. Record everything for the after-action report. The Council needs to see what happens when primitives attempt modern warfare." The human destroyers had spread into a wide formation, maintaining radio silence. Their ships looked impossibly small compared to the approaching Scourge vessels. "Energy spike from the lead Scourge bioship," Zekthul announced. "They're firing." Brilliant streams of plasma lanced across space toward the human formation. The officers on the bridge leaned forward, expecting to witness the quick destruction of Earth's military force. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships simply weren't there anymore. "What happened to the human fleet?" Admiral Kethvar demanded. Zekthul frantically worked his controls. "Sir, they're moving, but the energy signature is completely wrong. No ship can accelerate that quickly without inertial dampeners, and humans don't have that technology." "Find them." "Sir, I'm picking up multiple contacts throughout the Scourge formation. The humans appear to have split up and are moving between the enemy ships at extremely high velocity." Admiral Kethvar's species didn't have a word for what he was feeling. It was somewhere between confusion and professional interest. On screen, the tactical display revealed chaos within the Scourge formation. The human destroyers were moving like nothing the Admiral had ever seen, performing maneuvers that should have liquefied any crew aboard. They wove between the larger enemy vessels with impossible precision. "How are they doing that?" Lieutenant Voxhigh whispered. Before anyone could answer, the first explosions began. The lead Scourge bioship simply came apart. Not from energy weapon strikes or missile impacts. It looked like it had been torn apart from the inside. Debris scattered across space as secondary explosions rippled through its organic hull. "Sir, I'm detecting massive kinetic impacts on the enemy vessels. The humans appear to be using some form of high-velocity projectile weapon." Another Scourge ship died, then another. The enemy formation was dissolving into panic as their vessels were systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't even target properly. "This is impossible," Admiral Kethvar muttered. "They're primitives. They use chemical explosives and metal bullets." "Sir," Zekthul's voice was hushed with something approaching awe. "I think that's exactly what they're using. But the velocity... Sir, they're firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed." The human destroyers continued their deadly dance, appearing and disappearing from sensors as they moved through the enemy formation. Every few seconds, another Scourge vessel would simply cease to exist, torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their bioadaptive armor. "Get me Colonel Reynolds," Admiral Kethvar ordered. The transmission came through immediately, showing Reynolds standing in what appeared to be a combat information center. Humans in similar uniforms moved efficiently around banks of primitive-looking equipment. "Admiral," Reynolds said calmly, as if he wasn't currently engaged in the most one-sided battle the galaxy had seen in centuries. "Did you need something?" "Colonel, what are your ships doing? Your weapons shouldn't be able to penetrate Scourge armor." Reynolds smiled for the first time since they'd met. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Admiral, you're absolutely right. Our weapons are primitive chemical explosives and metal projectiles, but there's something you might not understand about human warfare." Another Scourge ship exploded in the background of the tactical display. "We've spent our entire history fighting each other. Every war taught us something new about killing. Every battle made us better at it. And we learned something very important a long time ago. Which is? It doesn't matter how advanced your armor is if I hit it hard enough and fast enough. Physics is physics, Admiral. Energy equals mass times velocity squared. We just happen to be very good at achieving extremely high velocities." The last Scourge vessel in the cluster came apart under a barrage of what the sensors were now identifying as depleted uranium projectiles moving at nearly 10% of light speed. "Sector 77 Alpha is clear, Admiral. Awaiting new orders." Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display showing the complete annihilation of a Scourge force that should have been able to destroy half his fleet. Not a single human ship had taken damage. "Colonel, how many of these special forces does Earth possess?" Reynolds' smile grew wider. "Sir, what you just saw wasn't our special forces. That was just the Navy. Our special forces don't fight ship-to-ship battles." The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in complete silence. Lieutenant HFY finally spoke up. "Sir, what do we do now?" Admiral Kethvar looked at the empty space where 37 Scourge vessels had been only minutes before. 800 humans in 12 primitive ships had just accomplished what he'd expected to lose thousands of troops attempting. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "We're revising our battle plan. The humans will take point." The Centauri Prime defense station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its biomechanical pedals slowly rotating to track the approaching coalition fleet. Admiral Kethvar had seen Scourge installations before, but nothing on this scale. The station was easily 50 kilometers across, bristling with plasma cannons and protected by swarms of fighter craft that moved like angry insects. "Fleet status report," he commanded from his flagship's bridge. 67 capital ships, 400 support vessels, and the human contingent," Lieutenant HFY replied. "Total crew complement approximately 2 million. The past 3 days had been a revelation. After witnessing the destruction of the Scourge cluster, word had spread through the coalition fleet faster than light itself. The humans had gone from being objects of ridicule to sources of nervous fascination. Their 12 destroyers now held position at the front of the formation, having earned that spot through devastating efficiency. "Sir, incoming transmission from Coalition Command," Communications Officer Thelness announced. The holographic display showed Fleet Admiral Morgeth, Supreme Commander of Coalition Forces. The elderly Karathi's scaled features were grim. "Admiral Kethvar, reconnaissance confirms our worst fears. The defense station is just the outer layer. Long-range sensors detect at least 3 more similar installations in concentric rings around Centauri Prime, plus a planetary surface completely covered in Scourge biostructures." Admiral Kethvar felt his confidence wavering. "Sir, that's a defensive network designed to stop the entire galactic fleet. Even with our full force?" "Exactly. Which is why I'm authorizing Protocol 7, total fleet engagement with maximum expenditure of resources. We either break through, or we lose everything." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew in somber silence. Protocol 7 meant they were expected to take 90% casualties to achieve their objective. "Signal the fleet to prepare for full assault," Admiral Kethvar ordered. "And get me Colonel Reynolds." The human appeared on screen immediately. His uniform looked different somehow. More tactical gear, less formal dress. The lighting in his command center had shifted to a red emergency illumination. Admiral, I assume you're calling about the station. Colonel, we're initiating Protocol 7. Full fleet assault with maximum casualties acceptable. Your ships should fall back to long-range support positions. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, how many people are you expecting to lose? Approximately 90% of our force. It's the only way to ensure the objective is achieved. That's almost 2 million people. Yes, the price of victory is always high, Colonel. Reynolds nodded slowly. Admiral, I need to ask you something. In all your battles against the Scourge, have you ever tried anything other than direct frontal assault? Admiral Kethvar's primary eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean, has anyone ever tried infiltrating their installations? Sabotage? Psychological warfare? Asymmetric tactics? Colonel, the Scourge are biomechanical entities. They don't have psychology to exploit, and their installations are sealed bioships. Infiltration is impossible. Reynolds seemed to be consulting something off-screen. Admiral, I'm going to need about 6 hours before you begin your assault. 6 hours? Colonel, every moment we delay gives them time to strengthen their defenses. Trust me on this one. 6 hours. And Admiral, you might want to keep your sensors focused on the dark side of the station. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Admiral Kethvar staring at empty space. Sir, Lieutenant Voxhai said carefully, the human ships are moving away from the formation. What? Where are they going? Sensor operator Zek Thul looked confused. Sir, they appear to be hiding behind that asteroid field. I'm having trouble maintaining sensor contact. Admiral Kethvar felt a familiar mixture of frustration and curiosity. Signal the fleet to hold position. If the humans want 6 hours, we'll give them 6 hours. But if they're planning to run from the fight... Sir, Zekthul interrupted, I've lost contact with the human fleet entirely. They've gone completely dark. 4 hours passed with no word from the human contingent. The Coalition fleet maintained position just outside the Scourge station's effective range, crews preparing for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. Admiral Kethvar was reviewing casualty projections when alarms began sounding throughout his flagship. Sir, massive explosions detected within the defense station, Zekthul called out. Multiple sections are venting atmosphere and biofluid. The main screen showed the Scourge station in the throes of internal catastrophe. Entire segments were dark, and debris was streaming from numerous hull breaches. What's causing the explosions? Admiral Kethvar demanded. Unknown, sir. There are no energy weapon signatures, no missile impacts. The station appears to be destroying itself from the inside. More alarms sounded. Sir, the second defense ring is also experiencing internal explosions. And the third ring? Sir, I'm reading similar destruction throughout the entire defensive network. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The impregnable Scourge defenses were collapsing without the Coalition fleet firing a single shot. Get me Colonel Reynolds immediately! The transmission took several attempts to establish. When Reynolds finally appeared on screen, he was wearing what could only be described as battle armor. His face was streaked with some kind of dark camouflage paint, and the lighting behind him was flickering irregularly. Admiral, he said, breathing slightly hard. Sorry for the delay. We've been a bit busy. Colonel, what is happening to the Scourge defenses? Well, Admiral, you said infiltration was impossible. Turns out you were wrong about that. Behind Reynolds, Admiral Kethvar could see other humans moving past in similar armor. They carried weapons that looked crude but effective, and several appeared to be wounded. You infiltrated the station? How? It's a long story, but the short version is that humans are very good at getting into places we're not supposed to be. We've been practicing for thousands of years. Castles, fortresses, enemy trenches, secure installations, we always find a way in. Another explosion lit up the tactical display as an entire section of the defense station went dark. "But how did you get through their biomechanical hulls?" Reynolds held up what appeared to be a small metallic device. "Plasma-cutting torch. Very old technology. Turns out biomechanical armor is just metal and organic compounds, both of which can be cut if you know what you're doing." "Colonel, there are supposed to be millions of Scourge defending those installations." For the first time since Admiral HFY had met him, Reynolds looked genuinely grim. "There were. My teams have been systematically clearing each installation. The Scourge are tough, Admiral, but they've never fought humans in close quarters combat." "Your teams? How many soldiers did you deploy?" 48 operators across 4 installations, 12-man teams for each target." Admiral HFY felt his legs weaken. 48 humans destroyed defenses that should have required our entire fleet to breach? "Well, we had some advantages. Scourge bioships are designed to fight other ships in space. They're not optimized for internal security. Lots of maintenance tunnels, life support systems, and structural weak points. Plus, they really weren't expecting boarding parties." The tactical display showed the final defense ring going dark as explosions rippled through its structure. "Sir," Zekthul called out, "I'm reading complete systems failure across the entire defensive network. And sir, I'm detecting movement from the planetary surface. It looks like the Scourge are evacuating Centauri Prime." Admiral HFY looked at the sensor data in amazement. The planet that had been completely covered in Scourge biostructures was launching every ship it had. The entire invasion force was fleeing. "Colonel Reynolds, are you telling me that 48 humans just broke the most heavily defended position in this sector?" "Not just broke it, Admiral. We've planted enough explosives to turn those stations into expanding debris fields. Oh, and we've also downloaded their entire tactical database. Turns out the Scourge have been planning major offensives against 12 coalition worlds. You'll want to share that intelligence with your command." Admiral HFY sat down heavily in his command chair. "Colonel, what exactly are these special forces you mentioned earlier?" Reynolds wiped the camouflage paint from his face, revealing a tired but satisfied expression. "Admiral, what you've seen so far, the ship-to-ship combat and the station infiltrations, that's just regular military operations. Special forces are what we use when regular military won't work." "I don't understand. What could be more difficult than what you've already accomplished?" "Well," Reynolds said thoughtfully, "sometimes the enemy isn't in ships or stations. Sometimes they're hidden among civilian populations or operating in areas where conventional military force would cause too much collateral damage. Sometimes you need people who can think like the enemy, who can operate completely cut off from support, who can make impossible decisions in impossible circumstances." He paused, looking directly at Admiral HFY. "And sometimes you need people who are willing to do things that regular soldiers won't do. Things that have to be done, but that no civilized person should have to live with afterward." The implications of that statement sent a chill through Admiral HFY's entire species' memory. "Colonel, are you saying that what we've witnessed is not your best?" "Admiral, you've seen our Navy and our regular ground forces. You haven't seen our special operations community. And frankly, sir, I hope you never have to. Because if we're deploying our special forces, it means the situation has gone very, very bad." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Lieutenant Vox High finally spoke up. "Sir, what do we do now? The entire Centauri system is effectively clear of enemy forces." Admiral HFY looked at the tactical display showing the fleeing Scourge fleet and the debris that had once been impregnable defenses. "Signal Fleet Command," he said quietly. "Mission accomplished. 0 coalition casualties. Request immediate debriefing on human military capabilities." He paused, thinking about Reynolds' final words. "And Lieutenant, add a personal note. Recommend immediate revision of humanity's status within the coalition. Upgrade from associate membership to full military partner. Highest priority. 6 months after the Centauri operation, Admiral Kethvar found himself in the most unlikely position of his career, requesting a meeting with the humans. The Coalition Council chambers on Nexus Station buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 species gathered for an emergency session. The reason for the meeting walked through the doors with characteristic human directness. Colonel Reynolds, now wearing the insignia of a full general, entered alongside a shorter human female with steel-gray hair and predatory eyes. Her uniform bore no rank insignia, but every being in the room could sense the authority radiating from her presence. General Reynolds, Admiral Kethvar began formally. Thank you for attending. And you are? The female human stepped forward. Director Sarah Chen, United Earth Intelligence Service. I believe you wanted to discuss the Velos situation. A collective shiver ran through the assembled delegates. The Velos situation was the Coalition's darkest secret, a nightmare that had been developing in the shadows for over a year. Council Chairman Vortek, an ancient Korathi with scars from a dozen wars, activated the main display. For those species not familiar with the situation, 3 months ago we discovered that the Scourge invasion was not random. They were being directed by someone within our own coalition. Murmurs of shock and anger rippled through the chamber. Admiral Kethvar had known this moment would come, but it still felt surreal. Intelligence operations revealed that the Velos Syndicate has been feeding Scourge forces detailed information about our military capabilities, fleet movements, and defensive installations. In exchange, they were promised control over territories after the Scourge finished consuming the local populations. Director Chen spoke up, her voice carrying an odd mixture of professionalism and something darker. Our analysis suggests the Syndicate has been operating for at least 5 years. They're responsible for the destruction of the Altair colonies, the fall of Kepler Station, and approximately 40 million civilian deaths. The problem, Chairman Vortek continued, is that the Velos Syndicate operates through legitimate businesses and government contacts across 17 different worlds. They've embedded themselves so deeply in our society that removing them would require dismantling the economic infrastructure of multiple systems. Admiral Kethvar leaned forward, which brings us to why you're here. Traditional military operations cannot solve this problem. We cannot bomb our own cities or invade our own worlds. General Reynolds nodded slowly. You need someone who specializes in unconventional warfare. Precisely. The question is whether humanity possesses such capabilities. Director Chen and General Reynolds exchanged a look that made Admiral Kethvar's skin crawl. It was the kind of look that preceded very bad news for someone. Admiral, Director Chen said carefully, what exactly are you asking us to do? Chairman Vortek activated a detailed holographic map showing 17 star systems. Red markers indicated known Syndicate operations, while yellow markers showed suspected locations. We need the Syndicate leadership eliminated, all of them, simultaneously, without causing civilian casualties or economic disruption. And it needs to happen before they can warn their Scourge allies about our new alliance with Earth. The chamber fell silent. Several delegates looked physically ill at the implications of what they were discussing. You're talking about assassination, Director Chen said flatly. Targeted killing of specific individuals across multiple worlds, probably in highly secure locations, definitely surrounded by innocent civilians. Yes. And you want this done simultaneously to prevent communication between cells? Yes. And you want 0 civilian casualties and no evidence that could be traced back to the Coalition? Yes. Director Chen was quiet for a long moment. General, what do you think? General Reynolds studied the holographic display with professional interest. 17 targets across multiple systems. High-value individuals with sophisticated security. Time-critical coordination required. Minimal collateral damage acceptable. He turned to Director Chen. Sounds like a job for the activity. Admiral Kethvar had learned to pay attention when humans used terms he didn't understand. The activity? Intelligence Support Activity, General Reynolds explained. Joint Special Operations Unit. They handle situations that are too sensitive for conventional military action and too complex for normal intelligence operations. Director Chen pulled out a small device that projected its own holographic display. We've actually been monitoring several of these syndicate operations for the past 2 months. Our preliminary assessment is that the mission is feasible. Preliminary assessment? Chairman Vortek asked. We identified key personnel, security protocols, and operational patterns. But Admiral, you need to understand what you're asking for. This isn't like the Centauri operation. This is state-sponsored assassination of civilians on foreign soil. They're war criminals responsible for genocide, Admiral Kethvar replied firmly. That's a legal and moral distinction, not an operational one. The point is, once we do this, there's no going back. The relationship between Earth and the Coalition changes permanently. General Reynolds stepped closer to the holographic display. How much time do we have? Intelligence suggests the Syndicate is planning to relocate their leadership within 2 weeks, Chairman Vortek replied. After that, we may never find them again. Director Chen manipulated her device, and new information appeared overlaying the star map. 17 targets, average security detail of 50 personnel, multiple layers of electronic surveillance. Several targets are located in high population areas. She looked directly at Admiral Kethvar. You understand that some of these operations will require our people to pose as Coalition citizens, possibly for extended periods. They'll need false identities, legitimate documentation, and support networks. Whatever you need will be provided. And if something goes wrong, if our people are captured or killed, Chairman Vortek answered before Admiral Kethvar could respond. The Coalition will deny all knowledge. Your people will be disavowed. Director Chen nodded as if she'd expected that answer. Standard protocol. General? Acceptable terms, General Reynolds replied. We'll need 48 hours to finalize operational planning and deploy assets. Admiral Kethvar felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Then you can do it? Director Chen deactivated her display device. Admiral, 3 days from now, the Velos Syndicate leadership will simply stop existing. No explosions, no dramatic firefights, no evidence. They'll just be found dead in their beds, in their offices, in their private shuttles. Natural causes, accidents, random crimes. How is that possible? Because, Admiral, that's what Special Forces actually do. The ship-to-ship combat you witnessed at Centauri was impressive, but it was just our Navy being very good at their job. The station infiltrations were our regular ground forces using standard tactics. General Reynolds picked up the explanation. Special Forces are what you call when the normal rules don't apply. When you need people who can become anyone, go anywhere, and do anything necessary to complete the mission. Director Chen smiled, and Admiral Kethvar realized it was the most frightening expression he'd ever seen on a human face. Admiral, you've seen our military fight your wars. Now you're about to see our intelligence services fight ours. 3 days later, Admiral Kethvar received 17 separate reports. Jex Velos, leader of the Syndicate, had suffered a fatal heart attack in his private office. Mira Kenth, his second-in-command, had been killed in a random street robbery. Tor Valan, their chief financial officer, had died in a shuttle accident. Across 17 different worlds in 17 different ways, every single Syndicate leader had died within a 6-hour window. Local authorities found no connection between the deaths, no evidence of foul play, and no indication that they were anything other than tragic coincidences. The Scourge forces, suddenly cut off from their intelligence sources, found themselves fighting blind. Coalition forces, now coordinating with human tactical analysis, began winning battles they had been losing for years. The war turned decisively in favor of the coalition, but Admiral Kethvar found himself unable to sleep at night. He kept thinking about Director Chen's smile, about 48 hours being enough time to plan and execute 17 simultaneous assassinations across multiple star systems. He thought about the casual way General Reynolds had discussed making people simply stop existing. Most of all, he thought about what Colonel Reynolds had said months earlier. If we're deploying our special forces, it means the situation has gone very, very bad. The coalition had won the war. The Scourge were retreating on all fronts. Humanity was now considered the most valuable military ally in galactic history, and Admiral Kethvar was beginning to understand that they had all made a terrible mistake. They had asked humanity to save them from monsters. What they hadn't realized was that to fight monsters effectively, you sometimes had to become something even worse. The humans had agreed to help. They had kept their word. They had saved the coalition. But Admiral Kethvar was starting to wonder what humanity would expect in return, and more importantly, what would happen if the coalition ever found itself on the wrong side of those cold blue eyes and predatory smiles. He made a note in his personal log. Recommend immediate establishment of permanent diplomatic ties with Earth. Highest priority. Do not allow any circumstance to develop that might make humans consider coalition as hostile. Because Admiral Kethvar had finally learned the most important lesson about warfare in the galaxy. It's not about who has the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. It's about who's willing to do whatever it takes to win. And apparently humans were very willing indeed.